So time is a really funny thing. As time goes on, people's opinions on things change. Whether it's movies, games, music, or even people, sometimes the passage of time can really change your perspective on things. You may grow older, you may mature, you may look at it in a different light, you might have nostalgia for something. There's a variety of reasons. But oftentimes when you look back on something that you thought wasn't great or sucked, you'll usually have a little bit of rose-tinted glasses. You'll usually be a little bit nicer to it. And in some cases you realize that you might have been too harsh on it to begin with. You might look at it from a fresh, new, different perspective and realize that it was way better than you initially thought it was. And so that's the subject of today's video. 10 games that I think everybody was just too damn mean to. Call them overhated, underrated, whatever the hell you want to call them. Here's 10 games that I think were unfairly hated at release. I'm not saying everybody and their mom hated these, but it seemed like a majority of people weren't fans of these ones. And now that some time has passed, I can look back and go, you know, those games really weren't that bad. They didn't deserve the hate that they got. And especially upon further investigation, some of these games are actually pretty good. But enough dilly-dallying around, let's get to the video. Let me know down below of some games that you thought were overhated, some games that the public was just way too mean to, or maybe just an underrated game that you played recently. Either way, you'll get a little heart from me. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so very much. Also got a Discord, totally drama free. But enough of all that, let's get to the games. Now the first game that I want to bring up here is one that I just never really understood the hate for, and that is Batman Arkham Origins. Now I remember when this game came out, and there was a large subset of people just lambasting this game, saying it was one of the worst Batman games. It was just such a huge step down from Arkham City and Asylum, and it was embarrassing, and it wasn't worth your time, and the multiplayer was dog shit. Okay, that one was correct. But outside of the multiplayer being dookie, I actually thought this was a pretty good game. No, it's not as good as Asylum or City, and even Arkham Knight is better in my opinion, and it's much more of that Batman Arkham experience that I still think it's totally worth playing nowadays. And what's funny is I feel like if this game released nowadays, people would actually be way more receptive to it. I think this game is way better than Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now, Arkham Origins, it totally does have its issues. The voice acting is a little funny since it's not the same voice actors as the main Arkham games, but I think it's more than fine enough. The story certainly does have its issues, and without spoiling anything, I'll just say that I don't really care for the direction that the game decides to take with its story. I've just never been huge on that, but I'm not going to act like it's terrible or anything. And it's a hell of a lot better than what we got in the Suicide Squad game, that's all I will say. Additionally, I remember when the game released there were a number of bugs and glitches, but I don't remember it being anything ridiculous or game breaking, and nowadays I'm certain a lot of them have been fixed at least. And again, it wasn't as good as the two prior games. It doesn't have as many memorable moments or set pieces, but it's got plenty of cool shit too. The fight with Deathstroke, the fight with Firefly are some of the best fights in the entire series. While the open world might feel a little copy and pasted from Arkham City, I still thought it was cool, and a lot of the side content was actually worth doing here. The combat is still great here. Yeah, it doesn't feel as nice as say Arkham City's, and there might not be as many tools, but I still thought it was pretty good here. The stealth is more than solid enough, and I think the game still looks nice nowadays. This is one where I genuinely think that this game was a bit overhated throughout the years. Even Warner Brothers doesn't seem to like it. They've re-released all the Arkham games numerous times over except this one. It's never been re-released, and many newer Batman Arkham fans don't even really know anything about this one, and that's a damn shame. Damn shame! And here's another one that quickly comes to mind that people just did not want to like when it came out, and that was Days Gone. I can say throughout the years, people's opinions have really changed about this game, and it also got a number of updates that really improved the game's performance and fixed a lot of bugs and glitches that people ran into with the original release. But outside of bugs and glitches, a lot of people just did not care for this game for its story, for its main character, for how long the game is, the writing, the tone, and just how generic some elements of the game are. But I actually think this game is pretty great, and While I would struggle to say that it's underrated, especially nowadays, it's definitely a game that I think people were just way too harsh on. I actually like the story. I'm not going to act like it's award-winning stuff. It's not going to win no Emmy. It's not giving Red Dead Redemption 2 a run for its money. But I think it absolutely does have its moments. And there's actually some really sweet moments in this game that were totally taken out of context and made fun of on the internet. But I really shouldn't be surprised by that. I also like the main character, Dejct. Yeah, he's a little out there and he does mutter to himself like an absolute psychopath throughout pretty much the entire game. But you know, that's not the most unrealistic thing, and I actually found Dejct to be quite enduring, way better than people made him out to be, and when it comes to the moment-to-moment gameplay, I'll be the first to admit that it's not the most original. It's another open-world game that sees you driving around, doing a large list of open-world activities. Plenty of them are a bit generic and things you've seen in plenty of other open-world games, but the game totally does have its own spin and flavor. See, they're not zombies, they're freakers, and the freakers can actually fuck you up in this game, but as you play through the game, you'll quickly find that you can also wreck their shit. And driving around isn't as standard as it looks either. You actually really have to maintain your bike. You have to watch the fuel and take a decent amount of care of it. And I think the progression is actually pretty solid in this game. When you start the game, the bike kinda sucks, Dejct kinda sucks himself, but by the end of the game, you are an absolute powerhouse and you are taking out hundreds, if not dozens of these freakers in like a minute or two. The hordes were nothing short of a spectacle. And yes, I do wish that they showed up a lot earlier in the game, but when they do actually show up, it's pretty incredible, and there's very few games that can give off this kind of moment. Like, it can get pretty crazy here. The bike also gets way better and you don't have to manage it as much. The game just becomes more fun the more you play it. I will say it does go on for far too long and the last act feels more like padding than anything else, but it's not a deal breaker by any means. I always thought Days Gone was good. I still think the game is pretty good, and I'm sad we're probably never going to get a sequel for some reason. So here's one I'm sure plenty of people are going to disagree with me about, but it's always been a little bit of a guilty pleasure for me, and that is High on Life. When this game came out, man, I saw so many people shitting all over it, with tons of people and several outlets calling it the most annoying game ever. And after playing through it myself, I just do not agree with that. I actually think High on Life is a good game. Yeah, it does have its weak points for sure, and the writing along with the comedy in general are a bit out there, but comedy's always been subjective. Look, I like Rick and Morty, I like Justin Roiland's style of writing, and I thought this game had plenty of funny moments. There are times where it really is annoying as fuck, and I'm like, okay, the game needs to stop. It's not really being funny, it's being more annoying than anything else. But there were plenty of times where I was laughing my ass off. This game has so many funny moments to it, and I have no problem saying that it still is one of the funniest games of the last few years. I think there were a lot of people that played this game without really realizing what this style of humor is, where it's all these kind of nasally voices that just swear like crazy and make jokes left and right and hope that a few of them stick. And yeah, that's not for everybody, but if this style of humor resonates with you, I think you're gonna think this one is pretty funny. There are still jokes from this game that I laugh about to this day, like, let's do it! That shit had me dying. And when it comes to the actual gameplay, yeah, it really is nothing special. It's a very standard first-person shooter. There's only a few guns that all talk to you, and they all have alternative firing modes, but I'm not gonna act like the combat is complex or fast or all that engaging. It's not challenging, and it certainly won't test you. But that doesn't mean I didn't find any enjoyment in it, because I absolutely did. The level design is actually pretty decent here, and some of the guns can actually feel pretty decent. Something else that I've always really enjoyed about High on Life is the game's overall presentation. Like, this is a beautiful game. It's so colorful and alien, and I really enjoy the art style and aesthetic. I also think the music is super underrated in this game. Like, it's actually pretty solid. I'm not gonna act like High on Life is one of the best first-person shooters ever and nobody's played it. No, it's not an amazing shooter, but I think this game is way better than people gave it credit for. And clearly, it struck a chord with some people, because we're actually getting a High on Life 2 next year, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually super excited for it. I'm sure it's going to have pretty much the same humor as the first game, but I think a sequel could really improve things, especially when it comes to the gameplay. Either way, I think the original High on Life is worth playing, unless this type of humor just does not float your boat whatsoever. It sinks that shit down to the bottom of the ocean, then I guess don't play it, but unless you're that, I think it's worth a play. So here we got a bit of a throwback with Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012. Now when this game released, I saw a fair amount of people actually say that they enjoyed it, but I saw so many people shit on this game, and throughout the years, I've continued seeing people shit on it. And I've actually seen plenty of people say that they think it's one of the worst Need for Speed games of the last like 15 years, and I just really disagree with that and would say that it's one of my favorite Need for Speed games of the last like 15 years. Immediately, people were skeptical and unhappy with this game because of the name. Need for Speed Most Wanted, the 2005 game, is maybe the most beloved Need for Speed of them all, so having another Need for Speed called Most Wanted, you already knew people were going to be scrutinizing it right from the get-go. And I'll be real, it's not as good as the 2005 game, and honestly, it shouldn't have the name Most Wanted to it. The only thing this game has in common with the original game is the idea of the blacklist. It's not even the blacklist itself. Yeah, there's just a list of racers that you go up against, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't have the personality, charm, or grit that the 2005 game had. This game doesn't even really have a story to begin with. There's just a list of racers that you want to beat. So I can see why some people were mad at it in that sense, but if you look at it past that, I think you'll find a pretty solid racing game here. It's the closest Need for Speed ever got to Burnout Paradise. You're in a big open world where you do open world racing, and I think the racing is actually pretty good. I think the cars have a great sense of speed, it feels nice, it's super arcade, and no, it doesn't go nuts and balls to the walls like Burnout Paradise, but I still found it to be pretty enjoyable. People also hate the progression of this game since you can just go find the best cars in the world and get them pretty quick, as opposed to unlocking or buying them, but I mean, if you're just naturally exploring the world and you don't know where all the best cars are immediately, I think you're gonna be just fine. I think people may be reaching with that one. Yes, if you've beaten the game and you know where all the best cars are, you're going to be able to go get them immediately, but I don't think the average player is going to have that knowledge. I also love the game's aesthetic and music. I mean, Galvanized by the Chemical Brothers is here. How could you hate that? The game's not stupid long either, taking you like 8 to 10 hours, and I found it to be some of the most fun I've had with any Need for Speed game. I loved it then, I still love it now, and it always surprises me when I see so many people dunk on it. Honestly, I could put a few more Need for Speed games on here like Heat and Unbound, but I think Most Wanted 2012 is the one that people are the most unfairly mean to, and I disagree with them. Oh, we're just rolling out all the old hits now with Dark Souls 2. I've been a Dark Souls 2 defender since day one. I got Dark Souls 2 when it released, and I thought it was great. And all these years later, I still think Dark Souls 2 is pretty great. No, it's not as good as Dark Souls 1. It's not as good as Dark Souls 3. It's not as good as Bloodborne, and it's certainly not as good as Elden Ring. But does that make it a bad game? No, absolutely not. I still think Dark Souls 2 is an excellent game that is totally worth playing. I'll be the first to admit that it absolutely does have its moments. There are plenty of areas that are just straight bullshit. They're nowhere near as well designed as what's in the other Souls games. The worst enemy placement in the entire series is in Dark Souls 2. It's all over Dark Souls 2. The enemy placement can just be total bullshit at times, and the game has plenty of frustrating moments. Trust me, there were plenty of times I wanted to rip my hair out. I probably did rip my hair out, and that's why I had to go get the hair transplant. It was from Dark Souls 2, damn it. But even despite that, here's my dumbass still defending the game. I think the game has plenty of great moments to it. It has some really cool boss fights. Yeah, the bosses are nowhere near as good as the first or third game. A lot of them really are just a dude. But there still are some really cool bosses here, and there are some cool areas. The game still has a delightful sense of exploration. I think the progression is still really strong, and I think the combat and RPG elements are just as good as the other Souls games, even if weapon durability and rolling is a little different here. The game totally has issues, but I think it also has tons of positives and is still very much worth playing, especially if you like the other Dark Souls games. Lastly, I've heard people go, oh, it wasn't by Miyazaki. Miyazaki didn't direct it. Don't play it. It's not by Miyazaki. You realize that video games are more than just their director. There's usually dozens, if not hundreds of people involved. And for Dark Souls 2, a lot of the same people were involved with the first one. I think if you're not going to play a game because a certain individual was not involved, that is a bit silly. But regardless of all of that, I still think Dark Souls 2 is worth your time. I've always said it's worth your time. Yep, you already know, it's the greatest hits because here we have DMC Devil May Cry. Now, from the moment this game was announced, people hated it. When it came out, people hated it. To this day, there is still a ton of people that hate it. They hate it because it's not the original Devil May Cry series. It's an edgy reboot that honestly didn't need to be made. and it took the series in a vastly different direction that people weren't on board with. And you know, I can totally understand why people didn't like it, but I remember when this game came out, I said, I'm gonna give it a shot, and I actually thought it was a pretty good game, and here we are 10 plus years later, and I still think it's a great game, and Capcom ended up continuing the original series anyway, so now this is just a standalone little side game. It didn't kill off the DMC series, it didn't reboot it into something that nobody wanted. No, it's just its own standalone game. Yeah, it absolutely does have its issues. The story is just not it. The writing is hilariously edgy and bad. Dante himself is just absolutely ridiculous, and the game has more than enough memed on moments. But the game has plenty of great things to it as well. I actually really like this game's art style and aesthetic. I think it looks really cool. Very few other games look like this, and I think its use of colors goes crazy. I think the combat is actually pretty solid here. No, it's nowhere near as complex or has anywhere near as much depth as the main series. Devil May Cry 4 and especially 5 have way more depth in this game. This game is simple by comparison, but I still think it's actually pretty fun. It's satisfying. There's tons of crazy combos you can do, and it's just fun. Like, even all these years later, I still think the combat is fun. I've always thought that the level design was pretty decent, and this game actually has some pretty cool boss fights. Yeah, Dante's interactions with them is just absolutely ridiculous, and you'll probably be laughing the entire time or cringing, but I've always very easily been able to overlook these. I will say though, if you are going to play this game at this point, to make sure to play the PS4 or Xbox One versions. Those versions are much better, they run better, and there's actually a lock-on button, which the original did not feature. And I do think that it is worth your time. It does a good job at keeping things interesting, and I've actually even replayed it, which is something I can say about pretty much every DMC, but I've replayed this one too. I think it's good. So for this entry, I'm just going with Sonic. I could honestly have so many Sonic games on here. I feel like nearly every Sonic game has gotten a certain level of hate from the last like 10 to 15 years, usually over small things that don't even really matter that much. For instance, Sonic Unleashed, which I think is a pretty good Sonic game, got tons of hate for the Werehog. People just hated playing as the Werehog. They didn't like the hack and slash gameplay and thought it just ruined the entire experience. I saw plenty of people hate Sonic Lost World for how many different things it did. I even saw plenty of people shit all over Sonic Frontiers. I still see people shit all over Sonic Frontiers, and you know what? I like all three of the games I mentioned. Some more than others, absolutely, but I still think they're all good games. Some Sonic games got plenty of hate from the moment that they released for good reason. Sonic Boom absolutely deserved all of the hate it got. Sonic 06 obviously deserved all the hate it got. But there are some Sonic games that people just did not want to like from the moment it released. And I think that if you go into most Sonic games with a pretty open mind and don't go, oh, this is gonna suck, this is gonna be shit, you're probably going to enjoy it, because I think a majority of Sonic games are actually pretty good. Contrary to popular belief, a majority of Sonic the Hedgehog video games are pretty solid to good. Of course, there's some stinkers in there, but what series that has been going on for 20 plus years doesn't have some stinkers? Honestly, this topic could be a video in itself, so I'm just going to move on and just say, play more Sonic games. So here's one that's always got me shaking my head with Paper Mario the Origami King. Now, the Paper Mario fan base is just kind of cooked at this point, but at the same time, I can kind of see where they're coming from. I love the original Paper Mario, and I especially love the Thousand Year Door. They're great games, and I would want Paper Mario to probably continue in that style, but Nintendo very obviously has a different idea for the entire Paper Mario series, and really every Paper Mario game since has not really been like the Thousand Year Door, the original, at all. And naturally, people don't like that. They don't want this series to drastically change. They want it more like the older ones. I kind of also do want it more like the older ones, but I'm not totally afraid of change for a series. And while I didn't enjoy Sticker Star or Paper Jam, I actually did enjoy Color Splash, and I certainly enjoyed Origami King. People didn't like it because it's not like the Thousand Year Door, and pretty much only wrote it off because of that. But I think this game has so much more to offer. It's actually pretty good, and I would say that it's one of the best Paper Mario games in the entire series. No, it's not as good as the original or the Thousand Year Door. It doesn't have the amazing partners. The combat is nowhere near as good. The combat is probably the weakest part of the entire game. But this game is more than just its combat. Yeah, when you're fighting basic enemies, I'm not going to act like this circle grid shit is all that fun. It's really just a basic puzzle, and there's only so many different setups, and once you know like all of them, you can very easily solve the puzzle, but at least the boss fights were pretty enjoyable here. But again, There's so much more than just the combat. There's the exploration, there's all the interactions, there's the story, which is actually pretty good, and I thought it was fun to just go through these environments. I've seen plenty of people go after this game because, oh, it's just got toads, it's just got normal Mario enemies, there's nothing unique or weird. That is absolutely true to an extent, but this game still has plenty of weird off-the-wall shit in it. Nowhere near as much as older Mario RPGs, but way more than Color Splash or Sticker Star, that's for sure. I also enjoyed this game's pacing, how you're going through several different acts and each one of them is actually pretty different, kinda like Thousand Year Door. Look, I'm never gonna convince an old school Paper Mario fan that anything after the Thousand Year Door is good, but for the 3 people who are still on the fence a few years later, I think this is worth checking out, especially since the Thousand Year Door also got a remake. If you want the Thousand Year Door, you can go play the remake on your Switch, it plays just fine. If you're okay with it being a little different and not going, oh, it's not the Thousand Year Door, then I think Origami King is worth checking out. So here's one that I feel like I defend every few videos, and that is Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. This game has been the butt of jokes from the moment it was announced. People absolutely dogpiled on it thanks to just how ridiculous and edgy the trailers are. People continued to dogpile on it when the game came out. And oftentimes when the game is brought up these days, it's to make fun of how silly and ridiculous just the entire premise is. And yeah, I'll be the first to admit, the story is absolutely ridiculous. Jack is hilarious. This game has plenty of funny moments. The writing is just absolutely abysmal. It's so bad that it's honestly kinda good. Like, I think the cutscenes are hilarious, Jack is great in all of the worst ways, and everyone else is just such a non-factor in this story that it has me laughing every time. I'm not coming to this game for the story, premise, writing, plot, etc. I don't think anybody plays Team Ninja games for that because they just can't really do a good job with it. I'm coming to this game for the gameplay because the gameplay I think is supremely underrated these days. I even myself was harsh on it the first time I played it, but as I've gotten older, wiser, and come back to the game, I quickly realized just how much depth the combat actually has. The combat is fantastic in this game. It is some of the best Souls-like gameplay you will find, period. It plays pretty similar to Nioh, but there's more depth than Nioh ever had. There's tons of weapons, they're all wildly different from each other, there's tons of strings, combos, abilities, there's numerous elements that can be applied, there's obviously a lot of role-playing elements here. Like, there is an ocean's worth of depth when it comes to the combat. The level design, it really ain't anything special. It's just about you going to the next area to fight more enemies. It's a good thing fighting the enemies is pretty fun. It's actually pretty cool. It's a bunch of old Final Fantasy enemies redone in HD with a little bit of edge. There's edge when it comes to the music, there's edge when it comes to Jack in the story, there's edge when it comes to me when, you know, I'm not going to finish that. Yeah, the game's edgy. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but man, is it so much fun. Yeah, it absolutely has its flaws, but it is still incredibly enjoyable, and the more you play it, honestly, the better it gets. When you unlock more abilities, more weapons, and you really start trying out other things, the game just becomes supremely enjoyable, and it should not be missed. So please everyone, stop shitting on my boy Jack. He doesn't give a shit about you or your name. He just wants to kick some ass. And then for this last entry, it's not just one game, it's actually several, and that is several Ubisoft games. Now, throughout the years, Ubisoft has gotten plenty, and I mean plenty of hate, and a lot of it is well deserved. They've had some executives and leaders say some pretty terrible things that are not only incredibly anti-consumer, but in some cases just anti-human rights. However, there's still plenty of good people that work at Ubisoft and make some pretty decent to good games. I've seen plenty of people write off literally every single Ubisoft game because, quote, it's a Ubisoft game. And yeah, while there are plenty of games that I would just write off as yet another Ubisoft game, nothing really special, there are still plenty of Ubi games where I'm like, no, this is actually pretty good. This isn't just another Ubisoft game. The Crew Motorfest is a great example. That game's actually really good. Watch Dogs 2, Far Cry Primal, Assassin's Creed Mirage, Riders Republic, and that's just to name like 5. I could probably sit here and list a few more, but the point I'm trying to make is not every Ubisoft game is ass. Not every Ubisoft game is the typical open world, bland checklist gameplay that you associate with Ubisoft. Sometimes there's actually a bit more here. Sometimes there's actually some substance as well, and I think there are plenty of good Ubi games. Nowadays I hear plenty of people call every game they put out Ubi slop, and you know, sometimes that's accurate. I played the new Assassin's Creed and I didn't really care for it, but I'm not going to act like every Ubisoft game is quote slop. But honestly, Ubisoft and its downfall could be studied in several videos. I'm sure there's plenty of people that have already done that. Either way, there's some good games here. If even one of these games was something you hated on in the past, I advise you to maybe rethink your stance. Try it again. You may actually be surprised. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you all, and if you made it to this part of the video, you can comment our code word, which is going to be strawberry, because I really want some strawberries, man. I'm really craving them. I know it's not really the season anymore, but I love me some strawberries. Anyway, see y'all later. Bye-bye.